Hello again, everyone. Ambassador Terry with another What Are You Doing interview. This week's guest is Dr. James McCabe. Welcome, Dr. James. I'm very excited to have you with us.
Thank you, Ambassador Terry. I'm very pleased to be here.
Well, I'm very pleased to have you, let me tell you. And ladies and gentlemen, he's doing some really cool stuff. This guy is a storyteller doctor, so to speak. Just a
Mm.
hint for you. So here comes the famous question, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. McCabe, what are you doing?
Doing the same thing I've always done, which is engaging in storytelling and helping other people tell stories. And my speciality is looking at how professional storytellers in the arts, storytellers of all kinds, how they hold people's attention because in the arts, you live or die by winning people's attention. And so those lessons that they learn are very, very valuable for anybody that's in a company or an organization of any kind, where they what they want to do is to spread the word and to persuade, but often they forget to involve their audiences before they go about that. So that's the I do the involvement piece, not the persuasion piece, which is rhetoric, and that's the art of persuasion. But what I do is storytelling, which is the art of involvement. That's the way I see the difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it comes to mind a very high number of speakers over the years that I've very much enjoyed, and their use of storytelling to really put out the points of their presentation, their keynote, or whatever it is they're doing. And everybody's laughing, crying, engaging, raising their hand, talking to each other and
Mm.
hardly touching their PDAs and
Yeah.
their cell phones. So it's like, this guy's great. Wow. You know, and
Yeah.
maybe you got a couple examples of how you engage people during the course of your keynotes and presentations.
Well, thanks very much. I think the most important thing, because I often don't have much time with people, even if it's a full day, it's not very much time to cover 10,000 years of human history. But storytelling is the kind of primary or primal way that people connect through a sequence of images, whether those images are on a film or in a song or written out in words. And the most important thing I try to do is to get people to distinguish between a persuasive argument, which works if you already have an audience, and a dramatic narrative, which builds an audience in the first place. So I think that people have to learn the difference between persuasion, which is what they normally do in business, and dramatic narrative. So to boil it all down into a simple formula, when I want to persuade you, I have to basically present not just a logical argument, but there's a sequence in beginning with expertise. So you have to, first of all, accept the fact that I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, that I'm not just a comedian. And then the second bit is I have to present a logical argument. And if I'm clever, I'll build in the counter argument into that. So the dissenters and the naysayers will give me some airspace. And then I'll follow that up with proof. And that sequence, which is expertise, logic, proof, that's the way that we convince people or sway them or influence them or share a message. But today, for all kinds of reasons, we don't have those captive audiences. And when you don't have a captive audience, that sequence of expertise, logical argument, and evidence doesn't work, basically, because you don't even have the time to develop that. So, what I try and do is get people to understand the difference between expertise and empathy, the difference between logic and suspense, and the difference between proof and surprise. And so, that second sequence is the drama or the story. So the empathy, suspense, surprise is the sequence. And I try to give people examples of what that means in ordinary life. And you can take those examples from anywhere in the arts or popular media, but you can also take them from business. And I think the best example in a business setting is the Apple campaign from the late 90s, Think Different, which didn't even mention Apple and didn't even mention computers, but created a dramatic narrative about outliers and geniuses and artists over the years. Yeah.
That was a brilliant campaign.
Yeah,
Absolutely
absolutely,
brilliant
absolutely.
campaign.
I think that's and I've studied the background of that. I don't think Steve Jobs himself even wanted to go with it because it was an agency that suggested it. Apple were 6 months away from bankruptcy at the time in 96, 97. And it's an amazing campaign because within 12 months after the release of that campaign, the share price had recovered 300% with no new product. And I think that's very interesting. Okay, because you can see there's no
Outstanding.
iPod, there's no iPhone, there's no iMac or anything like that. It's just the power of the narrative. So they kind of pivoted from being a dying brand to being, a visionary outlier, essentially, and appealing to so many other people. And I think they've benefited ever since. It's not the only example, but it's the best single example that I know. The other
I'm with you.
very good concrete example of the power of narrative is a project that was conducted about 20 years ago in the United States, in New York, I believe, called Significant Objects, where basically they were just auctioning rubbish, like basic old toys and rubber ducks and stuff, some of which had been given little stories. So some of the rubber ducks had names and backstories, and the rest were just anonymous. And you could see that the price that the toys and the useless objects that had narratives connected to them went for hundreds of percent more than the
Right
actual
on.
anonymous
Ladies and
objects.
gentlemen, right on. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why I ask him on here. Is this guy great or what? Thanks a lot, Dr. James. This has been just a wonderful experience. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening in. We're 200 plus episodes now and going strong. And thanks again for listening in.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Hello, I'm Ambassador Terry. Let's talk soon.